Good morning.
It's nice. It's a pleasure to meet you today.
It's a pleasure to be here as well.
And thank you for allowing me to talk to you today about your work. And also, I want to start by talking about your background and how you first became interested in space and astronomy, and what led you to your work with NASA.
There's a very long story there. I'll give you the short version.
The shortcut.
Yes. I've been working in computers since 1962. And always in support of science. And back in the mid-70s, I got a job working in support of astronomy at Arecibo Observatory. This was radio astronomy, and it led me to work on the Hubble Space Telescope, which was the big NASA astronomy mission that was being flown at that time. And so since 1983, I've been working in support of NASA on NASA space missions. And I've been doing that consistently since that time.
So let's talk about the Mars rover, the Perseverance rover, and then later we can come back to the Hubble Space Telescope for a little bit. Is the Mars rover coming back to Earth soon?
No. When we send these rovers to Mars, it takes 7 months for them to get there. And they're launched on these very powerful rockets. And they're very carefully landed on the surface of Mars. In the ideal case, we've succeeded in doing that. Not all missions to Mars succeeded. In fact, many of them have crashed. Ours, if there was wood, I would knock on it, because so far we haven't crashed. And these rovers, once they land there, are there. And they last as long as they last. The very first one we sent, which was about this big, lasted a week. The next pair that we sent, which were a little larger than this, have lasted several years. And their intended lifetime was 3 months. We would have had total success if they lasted 3 months. They lasted for years.
Wow, interesting.
The big ones that we have now are the size of a Jeep. And they are still, there's a pair of them, roving around on the surface. One's called Curiosity. That was the first big one we sent. The second one is Perseverance. Perseverance just landed about, I think, less than 6 months ago. And it's just starting its explorations. And these are fascinating devices because they're capable of moving all over the surface. And they have a whole collection of instruments on them that include cameras and spectrometers and magnetometers, and they're essentially a geologist on wheels. And what their job is to rove around the surface and do exploration of the rocks that are there, and of the atmosphere, and of all the other things that they can sense.
It was very exciting to see the landing on Mars.
Yes, with the rockets, yes. And then the balloons, and
yes.
yeah.
What a suspense!
Yes, well, it's they call it 7 minutes of terror because that's how long it takes from the time we enter the top of the atmosphere to when we land on the surface.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, there was a splash in news that said Mars has never had water because the red planet was too small to hold onto its oceans, rivers, lakes. What is your opinion on that truth?
Well, you'll hear more about this in the talk this afternoon because we've got pictures, we have evidence. The evidence, the science says that there were lakes and rivers and even oceans on Mars at one point. And some of the observations we've made from space actually show that there is still snow ice. There are patches of ice at the north and south poles of Mars now. So there's lots of evidence that there was water, but it's all evaporated.
So I can't wait to know a little bit more when you talk on the World After Concert tonight.
Yes, yes.
And we will have more information.
Yes.
Also, in December, NASA is scheduled to launch the huge 10 billion James Webb Space Telescope, which will be the successor of the aging Hubble Space Telescope. Will we be able to see Webb Space Telescope from Earth?
No. No. The Hubble telescope was launched in what's called an Earth orbit. So it's like 200 miles above the Earth. The James Webb telescope is going to be launched in an orbit that will take it away from the Earth. So it'll eventually be 1 million miles away. No way you can see that. With a telescope, you might be able to see it if you know where it is. But part of the reason for that is to get it as far away from the Earth's atmosphere as possible. And the James Webb, in particular, is an infrared telescope, where the Hubble was more about optical wavelengths. And so the James Webb has this huge sun shield to shield it from all the infrared energy coming from the sun. And it will then point out into the universe to take pictures of the infrared things out in the universe.
What will happen to the Hubble Space Telescope?
It will continue being used as long as it's usable. I think at this point NASA has decided, the Hubble was launched near the Earth in part so we could go and repair it. And there's a lot of stories about why that was a really good thing, because there were some early problems that required repairs. But over the time of the Hubble has been in existence, there have been several missions to it, I think 3 at this point, that actually replaced instruments. And so as technology advanced, we could put new instruments on it. But the NASA has decided now, because of the costs, that that's not going to happen in the future. Could change, it's unlikely to, because the James Webb has been so much more expensive, and it's got a huge collecting surface, so it will be able to produce images that the Hubble can't.
It was mentioned on the descriptive of your speech tonight,
yes,
that you work at the Arecibo Observatory.
Yes.
Was that the first time you actually went to an astronomy center facility and worked there?
Yes, it was.
And did you do something else before that? And will Arecibo Observatory be rebuilt?
Tough question. So the history part, my personal history, is I worked at Cornell University for 10 years doing computing prior to going to Arecibo. And I was at Arecibo for, I think, 7 years as part of and then heading the computer department. Arecibo was at the time the largest radio astronomy telescope in the world. It was 1,000 feet across, and it was a very unique instrument. It's actually been supplanted now. The Chinese have built an instrument that's even bigger and very similar. And I think the appetite in the U.S. for building another large telescope like that is not very great. The radio astronomy community is very well served by some of the synthetic aperture radar, synthetic aperture telescopes that can be built and have been built. And that instead of being 1,000 feet across, are effectively miles across. And so I don't think Arecibo is going to be rebuilt. It's a fascinating place to work. While it was there, it was absolutely unique, and there was a community of astronomers from around the world who came there.
Now let's talk about your role on NASA and JPL planetary missions. Did you have any administrative responsibility with respect to landing Rover's mission?
I am a manager, but I'm not an administrator. I'm a manager of technical projects, and the work that I've done, I've been at JPL for 30 years now. So in that time, I've worked on a whole series of different things, including technology program, developing ground systems for some of the spacecraft that we flew. One of the early jobs was working on the ground system that supported the Mars Pathfinder rover, the first one that we sent. Lately, what I've been doing, I worked on the Europa Clipper mission, which is going to fly out to Jupiter and go in orbit around Jupiter and Europa. I run an international standards program developing communication standards for space, and this is done in concert with 11 other civilian space agencies. So all the major civilian space agencies participate in this standards activity. And the other thing I do is I do systems architecture. So I've worked on communications architectures and security architectures for ground systems as well as things that are flying in space.
And then tonight we will also have more information on this.
I won't actually be talking about my architecture work tonight. What I've brought is a series of materials that talk about how we've evolved in our understanding of space, both the Earth from space, our planetary system from space, and the universe. So it's more about that than it is the work I do right now.
The far, far, far...
Far, far, far away, exactly.
Away. Before we close, is there anything that you would consider your biggest challenge in your career, or anything you would do differently if you had a chance?
Well,
it's a big question.
It is a big question. One of the biggest challenges, the things I do are very technical. They're complex. They have many, many moving parts, particularly space missions. There are things on the ground and things you need to do to communicate and things in space. And in the future, we're going to have even more things in space where those things communicate with one another. And so there's a vision of what we've done on Earth with the internet, where everything is now connected, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got my watch here, which connects to my phone, which connects to, right? So I can search the web.
They are connected to the satellite. And
Sometimes. One of the big challenges now is how to get spacecraft, space stations, habitats, some of them with people, many of them without, to all communicate in space, where the distances and the delays for communications are huge. Everything that's connected on the Earth now is connected in milliseconds. If you go to the moon, it's 2 seconds away. If you go to Mars, it's 10 minutes away. If you go to Jupiter, it's 40 minutes away, just to send a one-way signal. So the big challenge for us is how to create this space internet that can connect all these things and do it effectively, and can do it with pieces built by different countries, because they all have to be able to play together, and they all want to do their own thing. So that's the big challenge that we deal with. And in terms of what I might do differently, not much.
That's good.
I've enjoyed what I've done. I've been very fortunate in that I've had a series of jobs that were career changes that led me from where I started to where I am now. And I couldn't have imagined that that would happen, but it has.
So more and more work with NASA in the future.
Working with NASA, but also working internationally. The standards I work on involve people from England, France, Germany, Italy, China, Japan, Russia. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering my questions, and we look forward to hearing you tonight.
Very good.
Another very nice event at the World Affairs Council. What time are we meeting you tonight?
I think 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, right?
Is when it begins.
Yeah. Do you want to say a word, Jay, about the event tonight?
I'm just so delighted that this is the first opportunity for the World Affairs Council to begin their event program. And I think this will be a very exciting one. And we plan to have others now that we're becoming available to visit and join.